Good morning. I'm delighted to review today's book, which is the biography of Colonel Jeff Cooper. Jeff Cooper, The Soul and the Spirit, by Lindy Cooper Wisdom, who is Jeff's youngest daughter. And she was motivated to write the book following a trip to Africa, where her and some of her nieces, her mother, and some other clients of the Colonel all went on a trip around southern Africa, Cape Town, Pretoria, the Transvaal, and so on, and culminating in a hunt up in the eastern Transvaal at a game lodge up there. And Lindy writes, after being shown around the lodge, this beautiful area, to be shown the accommodation quarters, we immediately feel comfortable at home and perfectly content. There's more. We are shown our individual quarters. Danny has built a deck and small thatch roof bar, fully stocked. It has comfortable seating, both stools and tables and chairs, and is the perfect place to read or write in solitude or in the company of family and friends. It's a lovely addition. Danny invites closer inspection. There are enlarged photographs lining the interior of the structure, all of my dad on his previous hunt with other grandchildren and Danny. There is an engraved wooden sign hanging up by the entrance to the bar. It reads Cooper's Corner. Danny has built this entire structure for and in honor of my dad. And also in Africa, another host is asked by Lindsay, sorry, I'll just get the right page, why he so revered my father. And he said, because he always tells the truth and he cannot be bought. And someone suggested that a book should be written about him. And so Lindy decided to put this together. It's quite a read. It covers his entire life growing up in California. His father, John Dean Cooper, was fairly wealthy and a very active man, and he took Jeff on many hunting trips to really notable places, including Alaska, and he was successful in hunting trophy animals, which has been a passion all his life. It also covers the courtship of Janelle, the young lady who he was to marry, and she was a real beauty. And I had the honor of meeting Janelle in South Africa many years later, and she was a really impressive lady. And she did contribute to the creation of practical shooting. She actually designed one of the scoring ladders. It's called the J ladder in her honor. Then war is approaching, and Jeff joins the US Marine Corps, goes to officer school, and he's a bit disappointed that he's not deployed to one of the infantry battalions of the Marines, but is in the fleet, and he's a lieutenant or lieutenant aboard USS Pennsylvania battleship. I would add that it's probably unlikely he would have survived in an infantry battalion in the Pacific. The attrition was horrific. So we are lucky that he survived. So his war service, the Pennsylvania was the US battleship that fired more rounds than any other in the Pacific campaign, and it's I think it's it's still afloat somewhere alongside a harbour. Anyway, the war's over. He comes back. Tries. Another important part of the book, which has a big influence on what was to come later in life, is he is after 30 months on in the Pacific, he comes back to Quantico, the massive US Marine base, which also has the FBI Academy, and he starts shooting with the FBI, and there's quite a few pictures of that phase, and the FBI at the time, their pistol course was designed to fire 5 rounds strings, even though they quite often were carrying 6-shot revolvers. It was for some reason they fired 5 rounds, and they didn't like semi-automatics. Jeff, being a Marine officer, he had a 45 auto, and he'd already used it in the Pacific, and he wanted to use that. So the FBI instructors were dismayed because he was able to both shoot accurately and reload, even though he could have fired a full magazine. He restricted himself to 5 rounds, but even with 5 rounds in a magazine, he had plenty of time, and then he even offered to only have 5 rounds in one magazine, and then to load 5 loose rounds into a second magazine and load that, and he still was within their time limits. So he was not very impressed. He actually said to me that on a scale of 0 to 10, the FBI training was a 2. So, as I mentioned, he had used his 45 in action already, and he shot a Japanese on one of the islands during the Pacific when he'd come ashore to do some reconnaissance, and it's all detailed in the book. Then war's over, Korea comes along, and there's no room for he was a major, I think, at the time, for his rank, and cut a long story short, he ends up an old friend of his, or an old commander of his, was a branch director for the CIA, and Jeff joins that, and he's involved in paramilitary activities in the Far East, China, and Australia, and so on, or based in Australia. He doesn't talk about it. This has been gleaned from snippets, but he just blankly refuses to talk about his service. He signed an oath when he joined the agency, and he won't talk about it at all. And there's pictures in the book of the paramilitary guys out in the Far East. And then another thing he tried his hand at was motorsport. He enjoyed it, but never really was very successful at it. And then he became a college professor or assistant professor teaching history, and living in Big Bear Lake in California, and starting to raise his family, which grew to 3 daughters. And as a way of attracting visitors, there was a big festival in Big Bear, and he decided to host a pistol event. And at the time on the TV, there was a lot of Western cowboy type shows, Have Gun Will Travel, and Maverick, and things like this, Tenderfoot. There was loads of them, and so quick draw was the thing, and he put on this quick draw, but using live ammo and actually hitting targets. And it grew from there, and it was a spark that ignited a new international sport of practical shooting. He originally called it combat shooting, but California, being the place it is, wouldn't license or charter the league as the Southwest Combat League, so it was the Southwest Pistol League. And it grew from there into a worldwide sport, including the UK, and we all got involved in it. And competitions were held, and so on. He then founded the first real commercial pistol training facility at Gunsight in Arizona. He moved out there with Janelle and started from scratch out there, and built that up into API, American Pistol Institute. And he was going down to various places in South America, training people down there, including the protection detail for the president-elect of Guatemala. And he had some interesting adventures down there. So, as you know from other reviews I've done of the Colonel's books that he wrote himself, I'm a massive fan, and I was a student of the Colonel. And so this book was something that I thought was firstly overdue, but has been very, very well produced, and by somebody who probably had unique access to the Colonel. There's very few people could have got the inside story the way his daughter did. And terrific book, and recommend it to all fans of pistol shooting.